The unlikely encounter. In a dimly lit bar on the outskirts of the galaxy, a human sat at the far end of the room, nursing his last drink. His name was Ryan, a mechanic with no future, no job, and no direction. His life had been a series of dead-end jobs, one after the other. Now, with his last credit spent, he was left with nothing but his thoughts and the empty glass in front of him. The bar was quiet, save for the occasional murmur of voices and the clinking of glasses. Ryan didn't belong here, at least, that's how it felt. The other patrons were aliens from all corners of the galaxy, each more alien than the last. But Ryan, he was just a human, one of the most common species in the universe. He had no real place among them. His job was long gone, and his friends, well, they had all moved on to bigger, better things. He had nothing. As Ryan was about to leave, his mind drifting to thoughts of finding a new job, or perhaps just wandering until he could figure out what to do next, the door to the bar suddenly slammed open. The entire room seemed to freeze. A figure stood in the doorway, a tall, regal presence that made everyone in the room pause. Her skin shimmered like liquid silver, her eyes glowing with a soft, mesmerizing light. Her hair was like flowing strands of starlight, moving as if caught in a breeze that no one else could feel. The moment she stepped inside, the air seemed to grow heavy, as if the weight of the entire galaxy was suddenly pressing down on the room. Ryan's heart skipped a beat. He had heard of her, of course. The Galactic Queen. She was an alien like no other, a being of unimaginable power and beauty. Her name was Amara, and she ruled over a vast empire that stretched across dozens of star systems. Legends told of her strength, her wisdom, and her ability to command armies with a single word. But what struck Ryan the most was how out of place she seemed in this dingy bar. The Queen, whose voice could shatter worlds, was now standing here, in this lowly establishment, alone. There was no entourage, no guards. Just her. She walked in, her steps elegant and graceful, as though the ground beneath her wasn't worthy of supporting her. The others in the bar couldn't take their eyes off her, and Ryan couldn't either. His breath caught in his throat. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Then, the Queen's gaze fell on Ryan. Their eyes met. Ryan felt a chill run down his spine. There was something in her look, something deep. It wasn't just the power that radiated from her, it was something more. She wasn't like the others he had met before, people who flaunted their wealth or position. She wasn't arrogant or proud. There was a sadness in her eyes, a kind of loneliness that seemed impossible for someone of her status to feel. The Queen's presence was overwhelming, yet at the same time, it made Ryan feel small. It was as if the entire galaxy had turned its attention toward him in that one moment. He tried to look away, but he couldn't. It was like he was trapped in her gaze. A hush fell over the room. Everyone in the bar watched in silence, unsure of what to do or say. Ryan had no idea what to think. This was a being beyond anything he could comprehend. He was just a mechanic with no job, a nobody, while she was the ruler of a galactic empire. Then, without a word, the Queen began to walk toward him. Her footsteps were silent, but every movement she made seemed to command attention. The crowd parted, almost as if they were afraid to stand in her way. Ryan could feel his heart pounding in his chest. He stood up instinctively, unsure of why or what to do next. The Queen stopped in front of him, standing tall and regal. For a moment, neither of them spoke. It was as though the universe itself was holding its breath. Finally, the Queen spoke in a voice that was both soft and commanding, a voice that seemed to resonate with the stars themselves. "You," she said, her gaze locking with his. "You are the one." Ryan blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. His mind raced, trying to understand what was happening. Was she talking to him? Of all the people in the galaxy, why would she choose a nobody like him? "I need your help," she continued, her voice steady. But there was an edge to it. "I am in need of companionship, someone who can help me in ways that no one else can." Ryan's head spun. The Galactic Queen, the most powerful ruler in the galaxy, was asking him for help. For companionship. It didn't make sense. "I'm not sure I understand," he said slowly, his voice shaky. "I'm just a mechanic. I don't think I can offer you what you need." The Queen smiled, a small, almost sad smile. "Perhaps not what you think. But I promise you, if you agree to help me, you will be richly rewarded. More than you could ever imagine." Ryan felt the weight of her words. His mind was racing. What could she possibly need from someone like him? What was the real reason she was standing here in front of him, alone? But before he could ask any more questions, the Queen turned and began to walk away. She stopped just as she reached the door, pausing for a moment to look back at him. "Think about it, human," she said softly, almost as if the words were meant only for him. "I don't have much time, and neither do you." And with that, she left. The bar returned to its normal noise. But Ryan stood frozen, his thoughts swirling. What had just happened? Why had she chosen him? What did she need from him? And most importantly, what would happen if he said yes? He couldn't help but feel that his life had just changed forever. An unusual proposition. The Queen's arrival sent a ripple of tension through the bar. Ryan could see the change in the atmosphere instantly. The chatter died, eyes turned, and even the bartender froze mid-pour, as if fearing to interrupt something far more significant than a simple drink order. Ryan was no different. He couldn't help but stare at her, this otherworldly figure that seemed to carry the weight of the universe on her shoulders. Yet there was something different about her. Despite the elegant presence, the glowing eyes, and the aura of royalty, Ryan could see something in her gaze, something almost sad. It was as if she wasn't just another monarch with a world to control, but someone who had lost something deep inside herself. Amara moved toward the bar with a slow, deliberate pace. The crowd parted, giving her space, though no one dared speak. Ryan's heart raced, and he found himself rooted to his chair, unable to look away. She was so close now, within arm's reach. And then, unexpectedly, she stopped. Without turning her head, she spoke. Her voice was soft yet commanding, carrying a strange echo, as if it resonated not just in the air, but inside Ryan's mind. "Human," she said, the word almost a whisper, yet it cut through the quiet like a blade. "You look like someone who has nothing left to lose." Ryan blinked, unsure if she was speaking to him. He glanced around to see if she was addressing someone else, but the others were too terrified to even breathe. He realized she was talking to him. He straightened up, suddenly aware of his own disheveled appearance, the tired eyes, the faded clothes. I don't have anything," he said, his voice barely audible. He could feel the weight of her eyes on him, and it was as if she was peeling back layers of his very soul. The Queen's gaze softened, though her face remained as regal as ever. "That is exactly why I chose you." Ryan's confusion grew. "Chose me? I'm just a mechanic. I have no rank, no power. What could I possibly do for you?" The Queen tilted her head slightly, studying him as though she were contemplating a puzzle. "Not much, at first glance, I suppose." Her lips curled into a faint smile, almost as if she found the idea amusing. "But you are human, and that means you are something that others do not understand. You see the world differently. You feel things they cannot." Ryan shook his head. "I don't understand. I'm just trying to survive." "Exactly," Amara replied. "Survival. And that is why you are perfect for my mission." The room seemed to shrink around them as she spoke. Every word hung heavy in the air, and Ryan could feel the tension building like the calm before a storm. "I need someone who is not part of the court, not part of the politics or the webs of power that bind the galaxy's leaders," she said. "I need someone who has nothing to lose, someone who can think for themselves and not be swayed by power. Someone who can see through the lies that the galaxy's elites feed the people." Ryan could hardly believe what he was hearing. A queen, ruler of countless worlds, was asking him, a jobless mechanic, to help her with something. But what could she possibly need from him? What could he do that the galaxy's greatest minds could not? Amara's gaze locked onto his once more, and this time Ryan felt a chill run down his spine. There was no hiding from her eyes. "I have a problem," she continued, her voice barely a whisper now. "One that could destroy everything I've worked for, everything I've built. A threat so great I cannot trust anyone from my court, not even my closest advisors." Ryan felt a knot tighten in his stomach. Whatever she was about to say, it was serious. He could sense the urgency in her tone. "I need you to help me find a solution, Ryan. You will travel with me to places no one dares venture. You will help me uncover the truth behind a conspiracy that has been brewing for years. And in return," her eyes flickered briefly, almost as if weighing her words, "in return, I can give you everything you've ever wanted. Riches, power, a purpose, everything." Ryan could hardly comprehend what she was saying. He had lived his whole life without any real direction, bouncing from one failing job to the next. The thought of riches, of power, of having a purpose, was more than he had ever dreamed of. But there was a catch. He could feel it. "What's the catch?" he asked, unable to stop himself. He could not afford to be naive, not after all he had been through. The Queen's expression softened again, though her gaze remained intense. "There is always a price to be paid. The question is, are you willing to pay it?" Ryan hesitated. A mission with the Galactic Queen. It was a chance of a lifetime. Yet it felt like a trap. The weight of the decision pressed down on him, and he felt the room close in, the quiet of the bar now deafening. He could walk away. He could leave the Queen and her offer behind, continue his life as it had always been, empty, aimless. Or he could take a leap into the unknown, a leap that could change everything. Finally, he made his choice. "I'll help you," he said, his voice steady, though his heart raced. Amara's lips curled into a smile that held no warmth, only mystery. "Wise decision, Ryan. Prepare yourself. The journey will not be easy, and it may cost more than you ever imagined. But for a human like you," she paused, her eyes narrowing, "it could mean everything." And just like that, Ryan's life changed forever. The Queen's words echoed in his mind as he followed her out of the bar. He had no idea what he was getting into, but one thing was certain: there would be no turning back. The secret mission. The starship hummed softly as it cruised through the void of space. Ryan sat in the co-pilot's seat, staring out at the swirling nebula that stretched endlessly beyond the viewport. It had been hours since they'd left the bar, and the surreal nature of his situation still hadn't sunk in. The Galactic Queen, Amara herself, sat beside him, her presence filling the cabin with an air of authority that was impossible to ignore. The silence between them was heavy, but not uncomfortable. Ryan was too nervous to speak, and Amara seemed content to let him process his new reality. He had agreed to help her, but she had yet to explain exactly what this mission entailed. The only thing she had told him was their destination, an uncharted planet on the edge of the galaxy, one that didn't appear on any official star maps. Finally, Ryan couldn't take the silence anymore. "So," he began, his voice breaking the stillness, "are you going to tell me what this is all about, or are we just flying into the unknown for fun?" Amara's lips twitched, the faintest hint of a smile crossing her face. "Patience, human," she said, her voice calm and measured. "You will understand soon enough. For now, it is enough to know that this mission is of utmost importance, not just to me, but to the entire galaxy." Ryan frowned. "That's pretty vague. You dragged me out of my miserable life with promises of purpose and riches, and now you're keeping me in the dark. Doesn't seem very fair." Amara turned to face him fully, her glowing eyes locking onto his with an intensity that made him shiver. "Fairness is a luxury I cannot afford," she said softly. "You agreed to help me because you have nothing to lose. That truth has not changed." Ryan opened his mouth to argue but stopped himself. She wasn't wrong. His life before this had been a series of meaningless days strung together by survival. At least now he was doing something. Something that, if her words were true, could change the fate of the galaxy. Before he could press further, a series of lights blinked on the ship's dashboard. Amara leaned forward, her hands moving gracefully over the controls. "We're approaching the planet," she said, her tone shifting to one of focus and urgency. "Prepare yourself." Ryan looked out the viewport and felt his breath catch in his throat. The planet below was unlike anything he had ever seen. It was dark, almost black, with veins of glowing green light snaking across its surface like molten rivers. The atmosphere shimmered with an eerie, otherworldly energy, and the sight of it sent a chill down his spine. "What is this place?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "This," Amara said, "is Or-Kereth, the Forgotten World. It is a place of immense power and immense danger." Ryan turned to her, his brow furrowed. "And what exactly are we looking for here?" Amara hesitated for a moment, her expression unreadable. Then she stood and moved to a compartment at the back of the cabin. She retrieved a small, ornate box and held it out to him. "This," she said, opening the box to reveal a small glowing crystal, "is the key of the Loran. It is one half of a device that was split long ago to prevent its misuse. The other half, the core of Risa, lies somewhere on this planet." Ryan stared at the crystal, its light reflecting in his eyes. "And what does this device do?" he asked. Amara's expression darkened. "It binds souls," she said simply. "It was created eons ago by a race long forgotten, a tool for forging unbreakable bonds between beings. In the wrong hands, it is a weapon of unimaginable destruction. But in the right hands," she trailed off, her gaze distant, "it can bring unity, healing, balance." Ryan's mind raced. "And you need this core for yourself." Amara met his gaze, her expression unwavering. "Yes," she said. "Without it, I cannot fulfill my role as queen. My empire is fracturing, my people are losing faith, and my enemies grow bolder by the day. This device is the only way to restore what has been lost." Ryan nodded slowly, trying to absorb the weight of her words. "And what happens if we don't find it?" Amara's eyes hardened. "Then the galaxy falls into chaos." The ship shuddered as it entered the planet's atmosphere, the turbulence jolting Ryan out of his thoughts. Alarms blared, and Amara moved quickly to stabilize their descent. The glowing green veins on the planet's surface grew brighter as they approached, and Ryan could see jagged mountains and dense forests stretching across the landscape. They landed in a clearing surrounded by towering, bioluminescent trees. The air outside was thick and heavy, glowing faintly with the same green light that covered the planet. Ryan stepped off the ship, his boots sinking slightly into the soft, mossy ground. The air was warm, almost suffocating, and it smelled faintly of metal and earth. Amara stepped out beside him, her presence as commanding as ever. She held the key of Valoran tightly in one hand and a sleek alien weapon in the other. "Stay close," she said. "This planet is alive, and it will not welcome us." Ryan's eyes widened. "Alive? What does that mean?" "You'll see," she replied cryptically. As they moved deeper into the forest, Ryan couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The glowing trees seemed to shift and pulse with each step they took, and strange, whispering sounds filled the air. He tightened his grip on the makeshift weapon Amara had given him, a small blaster-like device that felt alien in his hands. Suddenly, a low growl echoed through the trees, and Ryan froze. "What was that?" he whispered. Amara didn't answer. She raised her weapon and scanned the area, her body tense and alert. The growling grew louder, closer, and Ryan's heart pounded in his chest. Whatever awaited them on this planet, Ryan knew one thing for certain. This was no ordinary mission, and if he wanted to survive, he would have to trust Amara and himself more than he ever had before. The hidden truth. Ryan's words died in his throat as he tried to process her statement. She was right. He had agreed to help her out of desperation, because he had nothing left, not even his pride. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized something strange. He had felt the pull of her presence, not just because she was powerful, but because there was a quiet, broken vulnerability in her that he couldn't ignore. Amara turned her attention back to the view screen, her fingers lightly grazing the control panel. The ship's path remained steady, cutting through the darkness of space, but Ryan could sense a shift in the atmosphere, as if they were approaching something important. "Where are we going?" Ryan finally asked, his voice quieter now. The question had been gnawing at him ever since they had left the bar. Why had she chosen him? "To a planet known only to a few," Amara replied, her gaze fixed on the stars ahead. "A planet that holds the key to something much greater than either of us. I came to you, human, because I need your help with something I cannot do alone." Ryan raised an eyebrow. "So I'm not just here to hold your hand while you do something royal and dramatic." She let out a low chuckle, a sound that surprised him. "No, you're here because you're expendable. Your life means little to the galaxy, but the success of this mission could change everything. For better or for worse." That was a bit too blunt for Ryan's taste, but he didn't protest. He was used to being overlooked, used, and forgotten. It wasn't anything new. "So what's on this planet that makes it so important?" he asked, unable to hold back his curiosity. Amara's eyes flickered with something dark, something hidden beneath her composed exterior. "The planet contains the ruins of a forgotten civilization, a race that once held immense power. A race that created me." Ryan blinked, his brain struggling to catch up. "Created you? Are you telling me you're some kind of clone or experiment?" Amara's face softened, but there was an edge to her voice when she answered. "Not exactly. I am the result of an ancient program, an experiment to create the perfect ruler. The ruins hold the knowledge that can give me the power to change the galaxy, to reshape it in my image. But there is a catch." Ryan leaned in, his heart quickening. This was the first time she had shown any real vulnerability, any sign of uncertainty. "What's the catch?" he asked. "If I fail," she said quietly, "the consequences will be catastrophic, not just for me, but for every living being in this galaxy." Ryan didn't respond immediately. The weight of her words settled over him, like a heavy cloak. This wasn't just some power grab, not just some alien queen trying to expand her empire. She was on the verge of unlocking something far beyond her own desires, something that could change the balance of the entire galaxy. The ship jolted suddenly, pulling Ryan from his thoughts. He looked up, and Amara was already at the controls, her fingers moving with graceful precision. A blip appeared on the radar, an anomaly. They were nearing the planet's atmosphere. "Brace yourself," she said, her tone now firm and commanding, the air of uncertainty replaced by a steely resolve. "This is where it begins." Ryan's pulse quickened as the ship began to descend. The planet's surface loomed ahead, its vastness shrouded in clouds, giving it an eerie, almost forbidding appearance. It wasn't like any world he had ever seen before. There were no cities, no signs of life, only barren landscapes and ancient ruins barely visible beneath the thick fog. "We're landing here?" Ryan asked, his voice skeptical. Amara didn't answer right away, her expression unreadable. But when she spoke, there was a deep, almost sorrowful note in her voice. "This place was once the heart of a great empire. The beings who lived here were far beyond us in technology and knowledge. But something happened. Something destroyed them. And now, I seek their power." Ryan's curiosity grew, but so did a sense of unease. What if this wasn't just a mission to help her? What if it was something darker? Something that even she, with all her power, could not control. As the ship descended into the stormy atmosphere, Ryan gripped the armrest, staring out at the swirling clouds. The planet below seemed to pulse with a strange energy, as though it were alive. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were heading straight into the heart of something ancient and dangerous. And that's when he realized This wasn't just her mission anymore. This was his too. "We have arrived," Amara said, breaking his thoughts. Ryan nodded slowly, his heart pounding in his chest. There was no turning back now. They were about to uncover secrets buried in the depths of time, and whatever happened next could change the course of the entire galaxy. The relic beneath. The planet they were headed to, Ryan soon realized, was not at all what he had expected. It was a barren world. No lush jungles, no towering cities, just endless stretches of cracked earth and jagged mountains that seemed to pierce the sky. From the view outside the ship's window, it looked more like a graveyard than a place of power. As they descended through the atmosphere, the ship shook from turbulence, and Ryan clutched the armrests of his seat. The Queen, however, was as calm as ever, her face impassive as the ship descended toward a narrow canyon below. "There," Amara said, pointing to a distant location in the canyon, where ancient ruins were visible, barely visible through the haze of dust swirling in the wind. "That is where we will find what we seek." Ryan could barely make out the structures, but there was something undeniably ominous about the place. The ruins looked ancient, older than anything he'd ever seen, as though they had been abandoned long before the galactic civilizations had even begun to rise. The ship landed with a soft thud, and the airlock hissed open. Ryan stood, heart pounding. The atmosphere on the planet was thin but breathable, though he could feel the dryness in the air immediately. The ground beneath his boots cracked like old bones, and the wind howled around them, carrying with it the scent of dust and decay. Amara was already stepping out of the ship, her long, silken robes flowing behind her like a shadow. She moved with purpose, as though she had been here before, as though this desolate planet held some deep personal connection for her. Ryan followed, his nerves still jangling. "This place is dead," he muttered, more to himself than to her. "How is anything here supposed to help us?" Amara turned to him, her gaze piercing, but not with the coldness Ryan had come to expect. There was a flicker of something else there, something more fragile, as though she had finally let her guard slip just a little. "Because what is buried here is older than the stars themselves," she said quietly, "and it holds the power to restore what has been lost." Ryan raised an eyebrow. "Restore what?" Amara didn't answer immediately. Instead, she led him to a set of massive stone doors, half buried in the rubble of the ancient ruins. These doors were covered in symbols, strange, alien markings that Ryan couldn't begin to understand, but they pulsed with a strange energy. He could feel it, a subtle vibration in the air that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. "This is the key," Amara said, her voice barely a whisper. "And what lies behind these doors is what I need to save my people, and perhaps the entire galaxy." Ryan glanced at her, skeptical. "A door? On a dead planet? This doesn't exactly feel like the start of a great adventure." Amara didn't respond to his sarcasm. Instead, she moved forward, placing her hand on the center of the stone doors. They responded instantly, the markings glowing faintly as the ancient mechanism inside the stone began to hum to life. With a loud groan, the doors began to open, revealing an inner chamber beyond. The air inside was thick with the scent of forgotten time, a musty, ancient odor that reminded Ryan of something that had been sealed away for centuries. Inside, the room was vast. At the far end, a massive altar stood, and upon it rested an artifact, an object that glowed with an ethereal, otherworldly light. The shape was unfamiliar, yet it seemed to call to them, as if it had been waiting all this time for someone to come and claim it. Amara stepped forward, her face a mask of awe and reverence. "This is it," she whispered, "the Heartstone, the relic that can restore what I have lost." Ryan glanced at her, his confusion growing. "What do you mean, restore?" Her gaze softened, and for a brief moment, the cool, commanding Queen was gone, replaced by someone who looked human, vulnerable. "The Heartstone can fix the curse that has plagued my people. We cannot love, Ryan. Our species is doomed to live without passion, without connection, without love. She turned to him, her eyes filled with something Ryan had never seen from her before. Hope. With this, I can change that. I can finally feel again. Ryan swallowed hard, the weight of the situation beginning to hit him. He had never expected to be involved in something like this. He had thought it would be a simple, dangerous mission to fetch some forgotten treasure. But now it felt much larger than that. The fate of an entire species was tied to this moment. But before he could respond, a distant rumble shook the ground beneath them. The walls of the chamber trembled, and dust began to fall from the ceiling. Amara's eyes widened. We're not alone. Suddenly, the room was filled with the sound of heavy footsteps echoing from the hallway behind them. Someone, or something, was coming, and Ryan knew that whatever was about to happen, it was far from over. The forbidden artifact. The ruins loomed before them, a crumbled testament to an ancient civilization long lost to history. Ryan's boots crunched against the dust as he followed Amara, who moved with such confidence that it felt as if she were walking through a memory, not a barren wasteland. Despite his growing unease, Ryan couldn't help but wonder, what was this place? Why was it so important? They reached the heart of the ruins, where a towering structure stood, half buried in debris, but still intact enough to exude a sense of eerie grandeur. It was a temple, its walls carved with symbols that no known species could read. The architecture was unlike anything he had ever seen, alien and yet strangely familiar, as though it had once been part of a world that had touched every corner of the galaxy before time had swallowed it whole. Amara halted before a stone altar at the center of the temple. There, on a pedestal, rested an artifact, glowing faintly with a soft, pulsating light. It was a small, crystalline object, shaped like an ancient key, and its edges shimmered with strange energy that seemed to ripple through the air. For a moment, Ryan thought the ground trembled beneath him, but then the sensation passed. Amara stepped forward, her fingers reaching out, but she hesitated. Her expression was unreadable, though there was a flicker of something in her eyes. A deep fear, almost. "This," she said softly, "is the relic of Voriel. It is said to be a key to the ultimate power of the universe." Ryan's eyes widened. Power. Like the power. The kind of power that could make you invincible. Amara nodded slowly. Yes, but it is not power to be taken lightly. The Voriel were the first beings to transcend the limitations of physical form. They unlocked the deepest secrets of the universe, but at a terrible cost. The relic holds the potential to change everything, but if misused, it could destroy everything as well. Ryan swallowed hard. He could feel the weight of her words. This wasn't just some lost artifact. It was dangerous. Yet, despite the warning, he couldn't shake the feeling that Amara was hiding something more, something she hadn't told him yet. "Why? Why did you bring me here?" he asked, his voice a mix of confusion and suspicion. Amara turned toward him, her gaze intense. "Because the relic chooses who it will reveal its true power to. It has already rejected the most powerful beings in the galaxy, but it might accept someone like you." Ryan blinked. "Me? But I'm just a mechanic. I don't know anything about artifacts or power. Why me?" Amara's eyes softened, but there was still a guarded look in her expression. "Because, human, the relic does not care about titles or status. It cares only for purity of intent." She paused, as if measuring her words carefully. "And you, for all your flaws, have something that even the greatest of us lack. The capacity for selflessness." Ryan felt a chill run down his spine. Selflessness. He was no hero, no noble leader. He was just a guy who had lost his way. But here, in the presence of this alien queen and this ancient power, the weight of his choices suddenly felt much heavier. A distant, low rumble echoed through the ruins, the ground vibrating slightly beneath their feet. Ryan's hand instinctively went to the blaster at his side, though he knew it would be of little use in a place like this. "We must act quickly," Amara said, her tone hardening. There are forces in the galaxy who will stop at nothing to claim the relic for themselves. Before Ryan could respond, a deafening crash came from the entrance of the temple. Figures cloaked in shadow poured into the ruin, their faces obscured by helmets, but their intent clear. They weren't here to negotiate. They were here to take. Amara moved swiftly, her hand outstretched toward the relic. "The time has come," she whispered. "Now choose." Ryan had no time to think. The figures were advancing, weapons drawn. The only choice he had was to move, either toward the relic or away from it. But deep down, he knew there was no turning back. He reached out. The price of power. Ryan felt a chill creep down his spine as Amara's words hung in the air. The Vorial were the first beings to transcend the limitations of physical form. It was an almost incomprehensible thought. Power so vast that it could reshape the universe itself. But as the strange, glowing relic pulsed softly before them, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was something darker beneath its outer. Amara reached out, her fingers brushing the surface of the relic, and for a brief moment, Ryan thought he saw a flash of something in her eyes, something raw and desperate. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by her usual composed exterior. "This is the only way," she said, her voice steady. "I need this relic to save my empire, to save everything." Ryan hesitated. "What do you mean? You're the most powerful being in the galaxy. What could you possibly need this for?" Amara's gaze softened, and for the first time since their journey had begun, she seemed vulnerable. "I am powerful, yes, but I am also alone. And alone, I am weak." She turned to face him fully, her eyes searching his face, as if she were trying to read the depths of his soul. "The galaxy is in chaos. Factions are rising, each with their own designs on my throne. My people are losing faith in me. If I cannot prove my strength, they will turn against me. The relic, it holds the key to an unimaginable power, one that will ensure I remain in control. It will guarantee my survival. But the cost is unimaginable." Ryan's heart raced. The weight of her words settled heavily on his chest. He'd seen the desperation in her eyes back on the ship, the cracks in her perfect facade. He had thought that she was just another ruler seeking to maintain her grip on power, but now he saw it was something more. She was fighting for her life, not just as a queen, but as a person. "So what's the catch?" he asked, his voice low. Amara's expression darkened. "The relic comes with a price. The Vorial did not unlock their power without consequences. Whoever wields the relic will be bound to its curse. The key is not simply a tool. It is a binding force. It will take from you what you hold most dear, your memories, your sense of self. It erases who you are, piece by piece, until there is nothing left but a shell." Ryan felt his stomach drop. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. "And you still want it?" "I need it," she whispered, her voice trembling. "If I don't take it, my enemies will take everything from me. I will die in the darkness of my own empire. But if I wield it, I will be unstoppable." For a long moment, there was only silence between them, the weight of her words hanging heavily in the air. Ryan glanced at the relic, glowing faintly on the pedestal. He could feel the pull of its energy, the promise of untold power, but he also felt the deep underlying warning. There was no such thing as power without sacrifice, and sometimes the price wasn't just your life, it was your soul. Ryan turned back to Amara. "What if there's another way? What if you don't need this thing? Maybe you don't have to lose yourself to save your empire." She shook her head slowly, a sad smile crossing her lips. "I've tried everything else. I've played the games of politics. I've made alliances and broken them. But in the end, the only thing that matters is strength. And this relic, it's the only path left." Ryan felt a pang of sympathy, but also a creeping fear. He realized that he wasn't just standing on the edge of an ancient mystery. They were at the precipice of something far darker, a force that could either save or destroy them both. Amara's fingers brushed the relic again, and this time She did not hesitate. The moment her skin made contact with the glowing crystal, a sharp electric shock surged through the air, and Ryan instinctively took a step back. The relic's glow intensified, bathing the room in a cold, unnatural light. For a second, time seemed to slow, and Ryan could see the change in her eyes widening as the energy of the relic surged through her. But it was more than just power that flowed into her. It was as if the relic was consuming her, peeling away her humanity, layer by layer. Ryan's breath caught in his throat. Amara. No. But it was too late. Amara's body stiffened, her features twisting in pain as the relic's power took hold. The air crackled with energy, and Ryan watched in horror as the woman who had been so poised, so untouchable, began to unravel before him. The cracks in her regal armor were not just metaphorical anymore. They were becoming real. Her skin started to shimmer and blur, and her face distorted, becoming something unrecognizable. The final words she spoke before everything went dark were faint, barely audible through the rising hum of energy. I am sorry. Then, the light of the relic exploded in a burst of blinding brilliance. The world around Ryan seemed to collapse, and in an instant, everything went silent. When the light faded, he was alone in the ruins. The relic had vanished, and so had the queen. Ryan stood in the aftermath, staring at the empty pedestal. The only thing left was the faint hum in the air, the echo of a power that had consumed both the queen and the relic. The galaxy's fate had changed forever, but in that moment, Ryan wasn't sure if it was for the better or the worse. As he turned to leave, a chilling thought crossed his mind. What had Amara truly become in the pursuit of power? And more importantly, what would he do now? For the first time since he'd met her, Ryan realized that he might just be the last human left to make that choice.